And thank you so much to Sophie Hannah for coming to visit us. If you want to follow her around today, she's in Leamington Spa this afternoon.
This evening.
7 o'clock, isn't it?
7 p.m, yeah.
And just for the video, and in case some of you might have just wandered in, Sophie Hannah is international best-selling author of psychological thrillers and has been writing Hercule Poirot novels for over 10 years now, which is incredible. She also established and runs the Dream Author coaching program and a master's in crime and thriller writing at Cambridge University.
I did run that, and
right.
I created that, but I don't run it anymore.
Oh, okay.
My coaching program for writers, Dream Author, became so big and all-consuming that I stopped working at the university.
And you've also written musicals? I
have, yes. One of which has been made into a movie that you can all watch. I'll tell you about that later. I'm not supposed to be talking about that today, but I will mention it later.
And her latest book, No One Would Do What the Lamberts Have Done, isn't actually out officially yet. It's out in 2 days, isn't it?
Yes.
So if you fancy a little bit of time travel, you can buy a copy today at the end and get it signed.
Absolutely.
There we go. And we'll do a Q&A at the end, and then
great
book sales afterwards. I'll get out of your way. Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay, well, it's lovely to be here, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to do a mixture of standing up and sitting down today because I'm... Oh, that's just a little thing. Because I'm recovering from a knee injury, and the best thing for my knee is if I sometimes sit down and sometimes stand up. So don't wonder what's going on. I've not got fleas. I'm just trying to move the position of my knee. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Lamberts first, and then in the Q&A, I'll talk about other things, whatever you want me to talk about. But I'm going to start with Lamberts. Now, I call it Lamberts because the title is long. The title is No One Would Do What the Lamberts Have Done. And as soon as I thought of that title, my first thought was, well, that's too long. I'll never be allowed to call it that. And then I thought, no, that actually is the perfect title because everyone will want to know what it is that the Lamberts have done. And when I told the title to people, the first thing everyone said, what did they do? What have they done? And so then I thought, well, I was planning to have the sort of blurb say what they've done, because that's not actually, a spoiler. What the Lamberts do that no one else would do happens at the beginning of the book. So it's not a mystery. There are lots of mysteries in this book, but that isn't one of them. But because everyone was so kind of like intrigued by just like, what could the Lamberts have done? I thought, I have to be mysterious about that as well. So I then adapted the hook. So the hook that I've been using to pitch this book to everyone is that the Lamberts are an ordinary family who do the unthinkable. So that was the kind of hook before the hook, which the original hook, as I say, was what the Lamberts actually do. Okay, so I mean, I can tell you what the Lamberts actually do because it's not a spoiler. What the Lamberts actually do is go on the run with their dog to protect their dog, to save the life of their dog. So their dog is maliciously accused by a spiteful neighbour of biting her daughter. Now, this isn't a book about what do we think about bitey dogs and what should happen. I really wasn't interested in writing that book. This is a book about a potential miscarriage of justice. The dog is cute and cuddly and has never bitten anyone and is completely innocent. So that is taken as read from the start. But this spiteful neighbour accuses the dog for various malevolent reasons. And Sally Lambert, the dog's human mum, gets a visit from the police saying that this accusation has been made, that the bite is very serious, that they're going to investigate. And Sally is not a fool. She knows that if this investigation doesn't go the way she hopes it will, it could eventually end with the authorities taking her dog away and even putting him to sleep. And she is just unwilling to contemplate that possibility. And I had this idea for two reasons, which I'll tell you in a minute. But basically, Sally is just not taking any chances. And I don't know about you, but I'll be honest, I would do what the Lamberts have done. I have a dog. I adore my dog. If there was any possible threat to him, I would definitely go on the run to save his life. And the thing that I loved about this idea of the family going on the run is that, okay, probably you've all seen that Harrison Ford movie, The Fugitive, where Harrison Ford is wrongly accused of murder and he goes on the run. When it's a person who is wrongly accused and they go on the run, what's sort of taken as read and built into a premise like that is that there's going to be an active pursuit of the fugitive, as in the movie The Fugitive. Harrison Ford doesn't just wander around not being looked for. People are hunting for him because they think he's an escaped murderer. But in a situation where a dog has been accused of biting and there hasn't even yet been a guilty verdict, and maybe there won't be, and with the police stretched to the limit and resources being scarce, as any field anyone's in these days, we're constantly being told, oh, there's no money for this and there's no manpower for that. No one has got time, energy and resources to look for a family that have gone on the run by choice with their dog, right? So I just loved the idea of this family going on the run with their dog and nobody pursues them. Nobody's looking for them, right? So imagine, those of you who've got teenagers, the Lamberts children are teenagers. So there's the mum who's determined to save the life of the dog. There's the dad who's like, look, I've got a job. I can't just she's like, we've got to go. So he's like, okay, I'll just, go to keep my wife happy. But this, there's a limit. How long are we going to be away? So that's Mark Lambert's attitude. And then there's Rhiannon and Toby Lambert, the teenagers, who think that going on the run with the dog sounds like way more fun than A-level and GCSE revision. But then the whole family is cooped up together, and where do they go? And given that no one's going to pursue them, how long do they stay away? Because, of course, the minute they come back, the whole thing starts up again. So I just love that idea of you're on the run, no one cares, no one's pursuing you, but also you can't go back. And that was part of the inspiration. And it occurred to me, that idea, when it's always the same with my book ideas. Several things happen in quick succession. So first of all, my brother-in-law's dog was issued with an antisocial behaviour order. That is a thing. A dog can get an ASBO. And my brother-in-law's dog was totally innocent. He was running around in the park. A woman, kind of a suspicious-looking woman with her friend, kind of walked over to him and then did a big production of falling over. The dog didn't touch her. And she said the dog knocked her over, which he didn't. She is now, this is years later, this woman is still trying to get 150 grand out of her insurance company. The insurance company are positive she's a total scammer, which she obviously is. Not obviously because the dog literally didn't touch her. So obviously this was a scam to get money out of the insurance, but it's still going on. The insurance companies have hired private detectives. It's a whole big palaver. But when that happened to my brother-in-law, I was like, that can happen. The authorities, the police, can turn up on your doorstep and tell you that your dog might be taken away. And what my brother-in-law had been told was that he had to agree. If he didn't agree to the ASBO, then it would be pursued further, which might lead to terrible things. If he agreed to the ASBO, then the dog would be allowed to stay with him and his life wouldn't be threatened. Anyway, this was all just so horrendous. And that was when I first thought, if that happened to me, I would be on the run in a series of 5-star hotels before you could say boo to a goose. So that was part of it. Then my husband and I happened to watch The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. So I put those two ideas together. And my nickname, in fact, for this book, the whole time I was writing it, my nickname for it was The Furry Fugitive, which I thought was so cute. And then my other nickname for it was Gone Dog. It's like Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, but with a dog. Like, what could be better? But then there was a third source of inspiration, and I'm glad Martin reminded me that this is being filmed, because I was going to tell you the full goss about the third source of inspiration, but because it's being filmed, I have to be a bit cryptic. I can still tell you the whole story, but I can't tell you who it was. But somebody in one of my close circles of acquaintance repeatedly tried to either harm or kill my first dog and has once tried to harm or kill my second dog. I know that sounds ridiculous. And at first, when it started happening with my first dog, I thought it was ridiculous too. I couldn't quite believe it. And then I had proof that it was happening. So what used to happen was this person, I'm going to call him David, just because that's not the person's name, David. Every time David came to our house, from the second we got our first dog onwards, we would happen to notice that both our front doors, we've got an outer door and an inner front door, both front doors would be left standing wide open. And David would say things like, oh, someone's left the door open. Oh, I hope the dog hasn't got out. And on one occasion, the dog did get out and very nearly got run over by a series of cars. This never happened when David wasn't in the house. I still couldn't quite believe David was doing it deliberately until the day when I got concrete proof in the form of actually witnessing David go to the doors, open them, stand them open, and he didn't go outside. Now, as my more fair-minded acquaintances have said, you don't know his motive. Like, okay, you saw him open the doors and stand them open, but maybe it wasn't in the hope that the dog would get out and get killed by a car. And I agree, maybe it wasn't. I personally can't think of any other good reason why someone would just go and open two doors, especially when it had happened 3 times before, especially when you know there's a dog in that house who runs out at the first opportunity. So I was happy with that as proof of David's guilt. So then, because everyone involved in this particular circle is very polite and jolly and British, nobody wanted to say anything, and that includes me. So I didn't say anything. I didn't sort of say to David, you must never come round again. My husband would not have been in favour of that anyway, because he, for various reasons, feels he has to continue a relationship with David. So what I did instead was, I said, right, all I care about is protecting the dog. That's it. So from now on, whenever David's in the house, I'm just going to lock every door and I'm going to hide all the keys. And that was what we did for years, for as long as we had that particular dog, who sadly died of natural causes. But when David was in the house, I would wander around like a jailer with a pocket full of jangling keys. It was the maddest thing you've ever heard. Everyone knew this was going on. No one ever asked about it. David never asked. You know, I said to everyone, right, nobody can go out on their own free will anymore. We're all locked in. If anyone wants to leave the house, you absolutely can. Just tell me, I'll come and unlock the door. It'll all be fine. Everyone accepted this without question. Everyone knew it was because David tried to kill the dog, including David. But no one said anything. No one asked anything. It was the weirdest thing ever. Then when we got our most recent dog, whose name is Chunk, the dog in the book is called Champ, and my dog is called Chunk, and I often get them mixed up. But when we got Chunk, circumstances had changed in a way that I can't say because we're being videoed, but I wasn't worried about the door thing anymore. So I thought, okay, if I'm not worried about the door thing when David comes round, that's David's MO, right? If he can't open doors as easily, then we don't have to worry. But the first time David was in the house when Chunk was there, that night we were rushing Chunk to the emergency vet. And my daughter said that she had seen Chunk licking sort of David's hand under the dining room table. Now, that isn't proof of anything. It could be a coincidence, but when you know you've got an aspiring dog murderer on the premises, then that does seem to be the most likely explanation. So all of those things combined to form the inspiration for Lamberts. And now the other thing I need to tell you about Lamberts is, okay, so it's the story of a family that goes on the run to save their dog. And it's also something else. It's also an incredibly twisty and unpredictable murder mystery. When I had the first idea about the family and the dog, another idea sort of piggybacked along with it, which was a twisty murder mystery idea. closely related to the family and the dog and all the characters. And I thought, no, I can't allow it to be a twisty murder mystery, because that's what I usually write. If any of you have read any of my other books, you'll know that that is my thing. I was like, no, this is a different thing. Surely I can write a book without a murder in it. But then this idea for the twisty murder mystery aspect wouldn't go away. And eventually I asked 4 people who I often ask when I don't know what to do, all very literary people. And I said, look, I've had this idea and it's probably silly. And all of them went, that's an amazing idea. Definitely do that. And then I had an idea for a further twist, which is a twist that comes right at the end. And I thought, I can't do that as well. I can't do that as well because the twist at the end is quite dark. I thought, I do want it to be a jolly book about a lovely dog. And I thought, I'll just ask those same 4 people. And they were like, yeah, you've got to do the twist at the end as well. So I did. So it is a very twisty murder mystery and the story of a family that goes on the run to save the dog. And so I will read you a little bit of it. And then I'll give you a chance to ask any questions you might have. But before I read you this bit, I did just want to say, writing this has been a life-changing book for me in so many ways. This is the book that I would have written if I just did exactly what I wanted and wrote my ideal book. And I did. But for a long time, for 10 years, it was the book I didn't dare to write because it was too unusual, I guess. And then I just decided that it was okay to write a book that, because despite being a twisty murder mystery, it does feel very different to my usual. But I decided I was going to write like the most me-ish book ever. And doing that and having the confidence to do it, doing it with my absolutely ideal publisher, has been really life-changing for me. And so I thought to myself, I think that if more writers tried to write life-changing books, not necessarily for millions or even thousands of people, but like for them, what would be the book that would change your life as a writer if you wrote it? And before I knew it, I'd designed a whole mini course on that subject. So if you think you might be interested, it's all online, this mini course. If any of you are interested in writing, if you think you might be interested in a mini course on that subject, which you can either attend live online, or if you don't want to attend live, I send out the videos and you watch them afterwards. I've got a bit of paper and a pen, which Martin has kindly given me. And I'm going to put it on the side here at the end and just put I'll write life-changing book course at the top. If you want to get details of that when it's available to join, put your email on that list. It will be very closely linked to Lamberts. Okay, now, sit down for the knee. I'm going to read you a bit from the first chapter. So this first chapter takes place in the police station. And there are 2 characters having a conversation. One of them is called Large. That's his nickname, Large. He's the senior police officer. And then the junior police officer is PC Connor Chantry. So Large and Connor are in this room together in Large's office. Connor has just come in with a thick, quite dirty and quite smelly bundle of papers in an elastic band. It's basically a manuscript. It stinks. It looks a mess. Connor is not normally in the habit of going into Large's office with a manuscript. Policemen don't generally carry manuscripts around. And Large is a bit discombobulated and a bit impatient because they've just finished dealing with the fallout of all the trouble caused by the war between these 2 neighbouring families, the Lamberts and the Gavies. And so on the top of the manuscript is the title, No One Would Do What the Lamberts Have Done, which is also the title of the book. It's the title of the manuscript within the book, and it's the title of the book. Okay, so I don't need to tell you anything else. I'm just going to read you what happens when Large sees that Connor Chantry has brought this manuscript into his office. Now, this is my first event on this book tour, and I've never read out this bit before. So if I stop, frown, say and occasionally, please bear with me. This is like the first outing of this bit. And this is chapter 1. Okay. "What's this, Chantry?" Large said. "Why is the name Lambert back on my desk?" "Sir, I think you need to read it," said Connor, fairly urgently. Large picked it up and removed the elastic band at the top. He spent nearly 5 minutes reading small sections from randomly chosen pages. "So," he said eventually, in the voice of one forced to consume many disadvantageous and depressing realities all at once. "So, you've written a novel about the Lambert family and their recent travails. I'll admit it. I'd prefer to live in a world where that hadn't happened. And in second place, my runner-up choice would be not knowing it had happened and never finding out." Connor didn't think he ought to know what the word travails meant. It alarmed him that he did. "Sir, I didn't write it," he said. "Then who did?" asked Large. "I don't know, and I'm not sure it's a novel." "Well, it looks like a novel," said Large, keeping his eyes fixed on the bundle, in the careful way a king might watch someone he suspected of being a treasonous impostor about to stage a coup. "It has a title," said Large, "one that's probably too long to fit on a cover. Just in case you were thinking of publishing it, which would have all sorts of legal..." Large broke off, but not before Connor had frightened himself even more by finishing the sentence in his head with the word ramifications. That was another word he didn't think he ought to know. Just to explain that, the fact that Connor suddenly has this vocabulary that he doesn't think he should have is significant. You're meant to wonder, why are all these strange words appearing in his head? "But you say you didn't write it," Large frowned. "Then what is it? Where did it come from?" "Sir, you need to read it yourself." "Well, I'm not going to do that." Large smiled conspiratorially, as if they had both known all along that they would end up here and could now unite in celebration. "Tell me," said Large, "tell me what you hope I'd think or do if I read it. That will move us further forward without undue suffering accruing to me." Connor had read the thing twice and still had no idea what he thought ought to happen next. He had even less of a clue what Large's response might be. He couldn't say that, though. It was too vague and likely to get him waved out of Large's office. Eventually he said, "If you read it, you would wonder, like I'm wondering, whether the coroner maybe got it wrong. Whether perhaps there's reason to suspect..." "I see, that'll do," said Large. He let the manuscript fall from his hands. It landed on his desk with a thud. "Take it away, please, whatever and whoever's it is. You know as well as I do, Chantry, the autopsy ruled out any deliberate action. Suicide, murder, both possibilities were eliminated, happily for all concerned. Let's not seek out further trouble, shall we?" "But then what killed her?" asked Connor. "Healthy young people don't just die for no reason. Look, I'm not saying it wasn't a natural death. We know it was. The coroner said it was. And there's nothing in those pages to support a murder charge, if that's what you're worried about. The CPS won't touch it, I promise you. But given that the autopsy found no trace of..." "Chantry!" Large cut him off again. This, Connor recognised, was the point beyond which no more of his unsolicited words would be allowed to pass. "Sir," he said, "Chantry, the Lamberts have been through enough, don't you think?" "Definitely," Connor agreed. And I trust you won't be offended if I point out that the Gavies suffered too, said Large. The Lamberts and the Gavies. Connor had been transfixed and now felt haunted by the way the two families had been presented in the manuscript as a sort of entwined pair, predestined to be enemies to the death. That was what the voice in the pages implied, over and over again. Whose voice was it, for God's sake? If only Large would agree to read the manuscript. Yes, sir, Connor said. All things considered, there's been an incredible amount of suffering on both sides, Lamberts and Gavies. We agree then, said Large. No need for any more suffering. Good. Now, is there anything you'd like to say before you leave and take this malodorous clump of pages with you? Yes, sir. Pardon? Said Large. Yes, there is something else I'd like to say. He had to try. If he didn't take inspired action now, he never would. He found it alarming whenever his wife, Flo, started to rant about her willingness to die on hills, but he knew he wouldn't be able to rest easy until he'd seen the view, at least, from the hill he was about to ascend. Is it about the Lamberts? Asked Large. The very finished and concluded matter of the Lamberts, about which nothing more needs to be said ever? No, sir, said Connor. It's not about the Lamberts. Then what is it about? My sister's tattoo, sir, said Connor. Are you being serious, Chantry? Yes, sir. You see, was he going to take the plunge? Yes, he was. You see, sir, my mum begged her not to do it, but there's no telling our Danielle. She'll always do what she wants, and she enjoys it even more if it pisses you off. So she got inked up, right? And it's, well, I don't mind tats, but it's pretty bad. Covers the whole of her left thigh. And sir, that's not a small area. Connor made sure not to look at Large's enormous stomach as he said this. And Mum thinks everyone who gets a tattoo is going to be unemployed forever or end up dead or in prison, which is obviously daft, but she is right about our Danielle's tattoo. It looks awful. Chantry, sir, let me finish. Right, but are you trying to trick me into wondering whether a natural death was a murder via an analogy involving a bad tattoo? My money's on yes. Okay, so it's meant to be an animal skull, but it looks like a motorbike that's been tortured to death. I've never seen Mum so distraught. Couldn't stop crying for days. Absolutely gutted she was. It's hard to explain if you don't know her. Don't try, Large advised. Just get on with it if you must. These weren't ideal storytelling conditions, Connor thought. Ideally, his tale would unfold in a more relaxed way and without his audience already having seen through his aim in telling it. Mum thought she only had two choices, and she hated them both. Either change her mind and be fine with the tattoo, try and convince herself it wasn't the disaster she thought it was, and then she and our Danielle could still see each other, still have a good relationship. Or, other option, stop seeing her own daughter. Like, distance herself, maybe just see her for Christmas and birthdays. Sounds extreme, I know. But, sir, you don't know how much Mum hates tattoos. I'm starting to get an idea, said Large. And our Danielle wore nothing but shorts that were like up to here to show it off. Mum was convinced she had to make this awful choice. Her only daughter or her integrity, I suppose you'd call it. No need for the only, said Large. Pardon, sir? Her daughter or her integrity, that's the choice. Doesn't matter how many daughters she's got, she could have 14. No, she's only got one, said Connor. It's just me and our Danielle. Large shook his head. It doesn't matter, Chantry. The only acts as a distraction. We don't need to wonder if the dilemma would be less painful if she had some daughters to spare. It wouldn't be. Large eyed the stained manuscript. Leaning forward, he tapped his fingers on the title page, then looked up at Connor expectantly. Well, go on, what did she choose? Well, she didn't choose either of the options she hated, said Connor. Thanks to my wife, Flo, she made a different choice because Flo, you see, explained to her about the boxes and saved the day. What boxes? Said Large. It's a thought experiment, Connor told him. You imagine you have two boxes, right? Both big, both empty, and neither one ever has to have any contact with the other. They can just sit side by side quite separately, being none of each other's business. That's what Flo told Mum. She said, there's no need to change your opinion about Danielle's tattoo. In box number 1, you put your acceptance of all the pain and anger you're feeling, all the crying and raging and pillow thumping that you need to do about it. You'll always hate that Danielle's vandalized her body. You'll never be okay with it. And you just fully accept that. You don't judge yourself for it, try to change your thoughts or feelings. You just stick all of that in box 1. Then, in box 2, you put all your love and wishes and hopes for Danielle. In box 2, you want only the best for her. And you trust her to make her own decisions and to know what's right for her. You accept all her choices and you love her no matter what. In box 2, you're just there for her. That's what Flo said, sir. And it saved Mum's sanity and the relationship. She and our Danielle are closer than ever because both boxes were full of acceptance. And you see, sir, acceptance and acceptance can't ever be at war with each other because they're the same thing. It's like Flo says, accepting that we don't like or want something doesn't mean we have to push anything away, either our true feelings or the thing we dislike. I see, said Large. Is your wife some sort of counsellor? No, she's got her own catering company, though. I see. Sir, speaking of boxes, this, Connor put his hand on the manuscript, arrived in a box with my name on it. A big, damp cardboard box that disintegrated when I opened it. The pages had been stuffed in no particular order, some scrunched, some folded, some flat. It took me ages to arrange them so that they made sense. I think if you read it the way I've put it together, you'll have as many questions as I've got. So think of it like this, sir. We've got box 1 over here, where we know that it was natural causes because a coroner said so. That's the only box I'm interested in, said Large. But then there's also box 2, said Connor. The one I found sitting between my car and our garage door a few days ago, with this book thing, whatever, inside it and all jumbled up. And in that box, what happened was, well, sir, it was murder. Read it and find out for yourself. Okay, so as you can see, it was quite funny, actually. One of the first people who read the sort of bound proof copy of Lamberts, she rang me after reading it and she said, you know, I really loved it and the twists are incredible and it's a great mystery, but, you know, it's also a literary novel. You do know that you've written a literary novel. And my first thought was to feel guilty. I was like, oh no, what have I done? But when I thought about it, I thought, you know, actually, she's right. It is a literary novel. And the whole sort of thing about the boxes, and you can tell already the tone and the sort of vibe of it is kind of a bit meta, a bit experimental in a literary way. So yeah, I didn't set out to write a literary novel, but that does appear to be what I've done. And as soon as she said this, and she actually said it reminded her of a novel we both like by Iris Murdoch called The Black Prince, which is a very tricky sort of literary novel and also a mystery. As soon as she said that, I thought, I need to actually tell people this so that they don't read it expecting it to be exactly like one of my other books, although it is easily as mysterious and twisty, and definitely as murderous. Okay, I will stop talking now and give you a chance to ask anything you want to ask. I've told you about the How to Write a Life-Changing Book course. Oh, another thing I will tell you is that all these books for sale are massively discounted to almost half price because I'd forgotten until I turned up. I've got so much going on at the moment with the book tour and my coaching that I forget almost everything. And I'd forgotten that I'm selling them. So I can't add up. So all the books are just £10 each. And the full retail price is $18.99. So huge discount. If Jeff Bezos can give them, then I can too. Oh, and I do also just need to tell you about my murder mystery musical, because I can't relax until I've told you about that. So the short version, in 2017, I was asked to write a school play for my children's school. My children went to an absolutely terrible school, but a school which had a brilliant music and drama teacher and a few other individual brilliant teachers, actually. But as a whole, the school was literally like the Fawlty Towers of schools. You could make a sitcom about the real things that happened in that school. I'll just give you one tiny example. One day, my son was letting himself into our house with his key, front door key, and his form teacher happened to walk past because the school was on our street, and still is. She sees him with his key, and she goes, "Guy Jones, get away from that house." He's like, "But I live here." I was like going home. Like, "You do not live there. Get away." And he's like, "I've got a key." "Well, I don't know how you got a key to that house, but there's no way you live there. And if you've got that key, then you shouldn't have it. Get away." And he was like, "Well, I can ring the bell and my mum will appear at the door." She was like, "No, she won't." Like, I mean, it was a proper, I don't know why, but she just was not having it at all. Anyway, so my son opened the door with his key. I sort of came to the door and I was like, "Oh, hello, Mrs." Keep her name a secret. So then at that point, our dog was there. At that point, she realized that she'd got it wrong and that was in fact our house. So she kind of took a step back, shook her head and said, "Well, you don't deserve to live in a nice house like that," and walked off. And I was like, what did that just happen? Like, seriously? That was just one of the things. I mean, so much mad stuff happened. Anyway, what was I saying about? Oh, yeah. So, but there was a brilliant music teacher and a brilliant drama teacher and various other brilliant teachers who all kind of didn't quite understand how they'd ended up in that institution and were all desperate to leave. And they wanted me to write a play for the next school sort of performance. And the last performance had been Romeo and Juliet, which the music and drama teachers had had the brilliant idea to turn into a musical. And it was incredible. Like, Shakespeare's words, brilliant words. He was good on words. He never thought to add some good songs, though. So the music and drama teacher added some good songs that were just like popular with the kids at the time. And it really improved Romeo and Juliet in a way that, like, if Shakespeare had thought of it, he would definitely have done it himself. So when they said, "Do you want to do a play? And I know you're a crime writer, so maybe a mystery." And I was like, "What about a mystery musical?" They were like, "Amazing." So I said, "Okay, I'll write the script and the words, but I can't write music." So the music teacher said, "Well, I've done some composing, don't know anything about musical theatre really, but I can have a go." So we decided to do it, and it just kind of, those very rare and special things which just like work like a dream. The minute you start doing them, everything just feels like blessed and perfect. And it was just an amazing experience. And the pupils, one of the things that wasn't bad about the school was the students. The pupils were almost without exception just delightful and lovely. And so they were so thrilled to be taking part in this murder mystery musical. And when it came to I think we had 3 nights scheduled for performances. Now, you all know what school plays are like, right? There's like 7 children who are brilliant at singing, acting and dancing, and they get the main parts. Then there's like 15 pupils who are pretty decent and solid, and you can give them some minor roles, but just don't give them a complicated harmony. And then there's like 59 pupils who are either very keen but like can't remember any lines, or really don't want to be there but somehow still are, so they grudgingly agree to play the part of a lamppost or something. So like, I was not expecting great things, but those performances were incredible. Just the combination of the enthusiasm of the kids and the perfect match with the story, it was just amazing. And the audiences, who started off being just like the parents and the families, they couldn't believe how good it was. And I sat there in the audience every night thinking, this is amazing. Even though I've written it myself, the music that Annette wrote was amazing. And I just sat there thinking, if Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cameron Mackintosh did a proper West End production of this with all the bells and whistles, it would be like the best thing ever. And at that moment, that became my chief goal in the world, and has remained so ever since. Now, one of the things I teach and coach on in my Dream Author program, which is a coaching program for writers or anyone who wants to write. And basically, if you either are a writer or you want to write, and your writing dream is currently not making you as happy as you'd like it to, or generating as much success as you'd like it to, that is what Dream Author is for. And one of the things I teach in Dream Author is that everyone should set what I like to call a dream goal. So most of us are used to setting goals that we think we might just with some difficulty and effort achieve. And that's great, but I think we all also need to have a dream goal, which we basically it doesn't feel possible. It feels absolutely impossible, like the height of magic wishful thinking. So my dream goal became having my murder mystery musical end up having a long run on Broadway, a long run at the West End, becoming Cameron Mackintosh's most successful show, leaving Les Mis standing and being as successful and famous as Hamilton. That was my dream goal, and still is. Now, what I also teach in Dream Author is that once you know what your dream goal is, you're kind of off the hook in terms of, you don't have to believe it's possible or will happen, because that's why you've chosen it as an impossible goal. But what you can always do is take the very possible steps towards it that you would if you believed it was possible. That's all you have to do. So if I believe that one day, in fact, I find it very easy to believe in anything good. I really do. When I had my knee injury, I was like, okay, obviously physiotherapy, but also acupuncture, homeopathy, Reiki, angel consult, anything, gypsy fortune tellers, I am willing to believe in almost anything because I just enjoy believing in stuff. So I actually don't have trouble believing that my musical, and then I wrote a second musical for the next year's school play, so that got added to the list. I do actually believe they will one day be super famous and successful, but if I didn't, I would know what steps I'd need to take, right? I have to mention them to people. I have to make a fuss about them. I have to, when someone says, well, I watched your musical and I thought West Side Story was better, I have to not go, oh, well, I guess I won't mention my musical again. All those things. So I started doing the very possible actions that I could do. And one of the main ones was just banging on about my musical all the time. And I once did that in the vicinity of a movie director. He was like, what, wait, you're telling me you've written the musical that's going to be the next Hamilton? I was like, yes, I have. And he was like, well, maybe I want to make a movie of it. I was like, I think you almost definitely do. Now, if you say that to 100 people, of course 98 of them are going to wander off and think, what a loony, right? But 2 of them won't do that, and that's why it's worth it. Anyway, long story short, he ended up making a movie of my musical, and it is available to watch on Amazon Prime. It's free with your Amazon subscription if you've got one. If you haven't got Amazon, it's on Apple TV Plus. I think it might also be on some free channels as well, like Google Play. It's called The Mystery of Mr. E, and it's a very odd and unusual, quirky musical about several things really, but it starts off with a stranger arriving at the home of two twins who are kind of detectives. They call themselves the Generalists. A stranger arrives at the home of the Generalists and they say, "Who are you? What do you want?" And he says, "I'm the murderer." They're like, "Excuse me, what? Are you joking? Is this a prank?" He's like, "No, deadly serious. I'm the murderer." And then he leaves. So it's kind of an inverted murder mystery, right? Where what normally happens at the end of a murder mystery, in other words, someone standing there saying, "I'm the murderer," happens at the very beginning. But instead of being the solution to anything, it's actually the mystery starting off, because who is he? Who's he killed? Is he lying? And the detectives then have to go in search of a murder with almost no clues whatsoever. So that is the premise for The Mystery of Mr. E. It's got nothing to do with the Lamberts at all, but I just have to mention it wherever I go. So do watch it. One thing I will say, it is really fun. Like, it's not Les Miserables in terms of the sort of heft and emotional seriousness, but it is incredibly good fun. And I don't know about you, but a lot of what I watch these days is so miserable. Even the great crime dramas, you know, you have to watch a fair bit of people being hacked up with machetes before you get to a good plot point. And Mystery of Mr. E is the opposite of that. It's a sort of quintessentially English puzzle-based murder mystery set in a country house. Okay, I will stop talking now. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. So stick your hand up if you have a question. Yes. Oh, you're welcome.
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
I know that you asked Agatha Christie to write them. Did you choose Poirot, or were you given a choice about whether you use Marple or some of the other characters?
I was given a choice. I remember at the very first meeting they said, "So would you want to do a Poirot novel or maybe a Marple novel or any of Agatha's other characters?" And I said, well, Poirot is the one that I would probably choose first because he's my favourite, and I'd also had an idea that I thought would work really well for him. And then at that point, the Christies, said, "Oh, well, we would love Poirot more than anything because he's far and away Agatha's most popular character." So at that point, it was decided.
I listened to your audiobooks via the Redditch Library service, and there's always a demand for them. I just wondered whether you've listened to any of them, and does that voice of Julian Ryan Tutt get into your head now or not?
Yeah, he's so brilliant. And I think, I mean, obviously lots of audiobook narrators are brilliant. I think he's particularly brilliant. And he is mentioned a lot when I get emails or messages online from people who've loved my books. Julian Ryan Tutt is the only audiobook narrator who ever gets mentioned. So lots of my readers read my books with their ears. So, you know, all my Simon and Charlie series, all my standalones, they all have great audiobook narrators, but Julian Ryan Tutt is the one that gets mentioned. Like, he's so brilliant, what a great actor, please can he do the next one? So, yeah, I think he is sort of exceptionally good. Although I have to say, I'm so chuffed, it's not out till the 26th, but the audiobook of Lamberts, one of the main narrative voices is being read by Gabrielle Glaister, who played Patricia Farnham in Brookside. Does anyone remember Brookside? Yes. So I was like an addict. Brookside was like my favourite programme in the world. And the idea that Patricia Farnham from Brookside is reading my audiobook is just like, I still can't get over that. So, sorry, you had another question. So I read pretty much nothing but crime and mystery and suspense. I do like a mystery. If I try and read a book that isn't a mystery, in fact, I tried to read 2 recently, and I just got so bored. It was just, both of them were people banging on about their evolving interpersonal relationships. And like, I was really interested for about a third of each book. And then I started to really want something to happen. There's only so much reading about someone's disappointing husband I'm willing to do before said husband either like goes missing or, you know, comes up with a twist of some kind. So pretty much only mysteries. I do also, though, read self-help books. I love self-help as a genre, to the point where I even read self-help books about problems I don't have, just in case. Those are my two genres. And I always reread Agatha Christie. You know, I mean, the pleasure in her books isn't only the plots. I think she's such a great writer and such a great sort of witty observer of sort of social satire and human nature. I read her constantly, even though I know all the plots now. Anyone else? Yes.
Do you have a favourite Agatha Christie book?
Do I have a favourite Agatha Christie book? I would say I certainly don't have just one favourite, but I have about 5. I could probably whittle it down to a top 5. So Murder on the Orient Express has to be one, because I do think that has the cleverest solution of all crime fiction. And I remember when I first read it, just before Poirot announces the solution, I remember thinking, there is nobody who can have done it. Everyone is alibied by somebody. Like, there's nowhere for this book to go. What's Agatha going to do? And then when you get the actual solution, you think, oh, of course, that was the only thing it could be, but you just don't think of it. So that's definitely one. The Hollow, another Poirot novel, but not as well known. Absolutely brilliant. Evil Under the Sun. And Then There Were None has to be, yeah, it has to be one of the best. It wouldn't be my top favourite, only because the thing it doesn't have that almost all of Agatha's other books do have is it's not really at all jolly. Most of Agatha's books, they have that darkness of human nature thing, but they're also a bit jolly. Whereas And Then There Were None is just chilling and sinister from start to finish, but it is a masterpiece. So that would be another one. And on the Miss Marple front, you'd have to have a Miss Marple. I would probably have to have The Body in the Library. That's the first Agatha Christie I ever read. And I think it is a completely flawless and perfect crime novel. Like, you cannot fault it. And some of Agatha's books, you can identify flaws in them, even though they're still brilliant. The Body in the Library is just seamless and perfect from start to finish. So those would probably be my top few. I should say, if there are Agatha Christie fans here, there is a strong Agatha Christie subplot in Lamberts where Agatha Christie gets mentioned, like, I don't just mean it's a bit like Agatha Christie, but Agatha Christie's books feature in Lamberts. And as I was writing that bit, I was like, surely I can write a book that doesn't have Agatha Christie. Like, surely I can just forget about it. But no, Agatha Christie had to be in there. Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what you look for when you pick up a mystery book. I heard you talk on a podcast about, you were talking about Haven't They Grown? You were talking about the difference between a mystery, which is just, here's a murder, someone's done it, versus the mystery of Haven't They Grown, which is incredible. And I'm honestly running around the library showing it to everyone, being like, look at the premise of this.
Yeah, so, I mean, I should say Haven't They Grown is my book from 2020, and it starts with a woman. She sees a friend of hers that she hasn't seen for 12 years, and that friend is with her children, who the narrator also hasn't seen for 12 years. When she last knew this family, the children were 5 and 3 years old. Now, 12 years later, there are the children with their mum, and she hears the mum calling them by their names, Thomas and Emily. They still, the 2 children, appear to be 5 and 3 years old. They're wearing the same clothes they were wearing when she last saw them. So that is the hook for Haven't They Grown? So what I look for, both as a writer and as a reader, is a mysterious or intriguing hook that isn't just ordinary. So what I regard as an ordinary hook for a murder mystery is a dead body's been found, it's Marjorie from the post office, somebody's obviously killed her and we need to find out who and why. I do read books like that, and they can be interesting, but there's nothing particularly interesting about the premise. It's kind of like what I would call an ordinary murder situation. And as I say, loads of those books are brilliant, but I think because Agatha Christie is my favourite crime writer, she always had some extra element to her hook. Like a murder has been advertised in the local newspaper. Who would ever do that? Or everyone's been murdered and there's no one left alive to be the killer. What on earth can possibly have happened? And I just prefer the kind of mystery hook where the reader cannot even begin to speculate about what might have happened. Whereas with the other kind, where it's like Marjorie from the post office has been murdered, who killed her, you can easily speculate. Well, maybe it was someone who didn't like her very much, or, you know, there are possible answers that spring to mind. I like the kind of plot hook where you're like, I can't think of a single thing that would explain that. And then you have to read on to find out. So that's what I always look for, both as a writer and a reader. And I wish there were more of them. Like, at the moment, I'm halfway through reading with my ears a book that I'm not especially enjoying. It's meant to be a murder mystery. The murder hasn't happened yet. Just some people are kind of grumbling about things. And I'm like about a third of the way in, and I just don't feel interested and hooked enough. And I like the kind of opening premise where I'm just so hooked from the start. So if anyone knows of any books like that, let me know. I'll download it. Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry to ask about Poirot again, but
No, it's okay.
so huge to us all. We're so glad to hear. What's it like to write about someone else's character? So I've seen the books you've invented everyone, but do you know what would Agatha do, or is it you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first agreed to write Poirot, one thing I definitely knew was that my writing style would be a bit different from Agatha Christie's. So I decided to create a new narrator and sort of sidekick for Poirot, who Agatha hasn't written about because he's my invention. So if my books had a different tone and flavour in any way, that was kind of explainable by the fact that we've got a new character. So that was my first decision. And then beyond that, like, I really feel with the Poirots that I am creating a lot of each book, certainly enough to satisfy my creative urges. So I have to make up all of the plots, all of the characters apart from Poirot, and that is plenty for me to be getting on with. And the thing that I get from Agatha is obviously the brilliant ingredient of Poirot, which is so essential, and also the kind of blueprint, I guess. Like, I have this vague idea that whatever I write, it has to be appropriately Agatha-ish in terms of its story structure. So I have to play fair with the reader. I have to put in clues. I have to make sure it's unguessable, because Agatha's always cleverer than the reader. So you can't have a predictable or guessable ending. But I'm just really happy to inherit all those ingredients from her and then add loads of my own. It feels amazing. And it was just such a huge honour to be asked to do it. I still can't quite believe it. When I think of like the 12-year-old version of me who read The Body in the Library for the first time and then became completely addicted to Agatha Christie, I would never in a million years have imagined that I would be the first person to write Poirot after Agatha Christie's death. I mean, that if someone had told 12-year-old me that, I would have done even less work at school than because I always neglected all my work and just read Agatha Christie novels. And my parents used to go, this really won't do. If you want to be successful in life, you've got to stop reading Agatha Christie all the time and start, doing your homework. And that was such terrible advice. So I'm just so glad I ignored it and just carried on reading Agatha Christie.
What do you find about these TV versions where they even change the murder?
Oh.
My daughter and I get so angry.
Yeah. So there have been some brilliant historically, there have been some brilliant adaptations. I mean, I really like the 1950s black and white movie, Witness for the Prosecution, which is an adaptation of Agatha's play, which uses the play script, doesn't change anything, but it's made it into a brilliant movie, like one of the all-time best movies, I think. and I like is it Albert Finney, 1970s Murder on the Orient Express? The ones that really aren't adaptations of Agatha Christie, I don't like as much, because they're just not, like, for me, if you're adapting a book, you want to adapt the book. Otherwise, it might be a great new story in its own right, and I'm sure some of them are, but for me, an Agatha Christie adaptation that I like would have the story of an Agatha Christie. Yeah, my attitude to where the story has been changed fundamentally is I just view it as a completely different thing rather than as an Agatha Christie adaptation. But I think, as an Agatha Christie fan, I obviously, if I'm watching an Agatha Christie adaptation, I want to see, like, what's the best screen version there could be of an Agatha Christie story. That's what I'm interested in. I think it's quite interesting, though, the recent movies, the Kenneth Branagh Poirot movies, are quite interesting because they're very, they look very nice. They're very sort of visually impressive. But what's interesting about them is, and I really like Kenneth Branagh as an actor as well, but you can tell that they don't have the kind of mystery puzzle engine as their main driving force. And that is really interesting. When you watch the David Suchet ones, which I think are brilliant in general, and the Albert Finney, even the Peter Ustinov ones, the sort of older adaptations, what they obviously they stick to the same story, but they also stick to, we really care about this mystery. It's so puzzling. That is the engine that drives it all forward. And if you watch the Kenneth Branagh adaptations, that is not the engine at all. There are mysteries in them, of course, and they get solved, but you can somehow tell that none of that is the priority of the filmmaking team. And I think that is quite fascinating. It's a subtle thing, but when you're watching the Kenneth Branagh movies, you're impressed by the scenery and maybe some of the performances and the atmosphere, but it's almost, you feel as though they kind of think, well, we better put the murder in as well. It doesn't feel like the main point. And for me, that is the main point of an Agatha Christie. It is the puzzle-based plot.
Were there any conditions that Agatha Christie group you had the instruction of? Was there any conditions that they asked you to include?
So I think there would have been. I mean, for sure they would have been. When they first took me on, I was an unknown quantity to them, and they didn't know whether they'd approve of what I did. But it just so happened that we agreed about everything. So it felt very fortuitous, like everything I said I wanted to do was exactly what they'd hoped I would do, and everything they said they wanted me to do was exactly what I wanted to do. So we very quickly just relaxed and went, isn't this all brilliant? But I think there would have been conditions. If I'd said, in my Poirot novel, I want Poirot to be, a skateboarding graffiti artist, I think they would have very quickly imposed some conditions.
Did they vet the book before?
Yeah, so we had a contract that made it very clear that I would run my story idea past them. I would then give a detailed plan. And I wanted this as much as they did, because the last thing I wanted was to spend a year or more writing a book. Let's say I'd thought of, setting it in, I don't know, Portugal, only to have them say, oh, we hate books set in Portugal. So I wanted to check ahead of time that whatever I was going to be working so hard on, they liked the sound of, and there was nothing about it that they knew they didn't want. Yes.
Why do you think we're so obsessed with engrossing?
Why are we so obsessed? Why are we so obsessed with crime? Well, so people say different things about this. Lots of people say that crime fiction is a really good way, a good sort of enjoyable entertainment way to examine socioeconomic problems. And like whatever the preoccupations of a society are, crime fiction enables us to sort of have a fun plot while we're looking at the ills of society. I think that's possibly true, but for me, that's not it at all. I mean, I generally don't want to immerse myself in society's problems all that much. For me, it's the fact that our main motivation in life is wondering about things we don't know and wanting answers we don't have. That is such a big driver for almost all of us. If we knew, imagine if we each made a list of all the questions we'd like answers to, and then we just got those answers and they were definitely true, right? We might think we want that, but it would be so boring. And then on a wider scale, like, what's going to happen to the economy and what's going to happen in the jobs market and what's going to happen in America. And like, if we knew all that, actually what's going to happen in America is that on the 14th of August, Arnold Schwarzenegger is somehow going to become president. Like, if we knew and exactly how it all came to be and we could just do that with all of the future, we'd be so bored. But luckily we don't know. And we don't know most of what we'd love to know. We don't know what's going to happen on a world scale. We also don't know whether that person who said that thing last week meant it in a snide way, or were they just trying to be nice? I mean, I spend hours worrying about things like that. When he did that, did he think that or did he mean that? So we really don't know anything. And our main motivation that gets us through every day is trying to get a bit closer to certainty in all the things we'd like answers to. And crime and suspense fiction is a genre that says, that wondering and wanting answers that you're constantly doing. This is a genre that is all about first making you want answers, absolutely loads, and then giving you those answers. And they're going to be more fun and unexpected than you could possibly imagine. So I think that's what it is. But I am the only person who thinks that or who's ever said it, so I could be wrong. Everyone else says the society thing and battle between good and evil and order restored at the end. But I think it's the thing I said. And also, I think, people love books that are well structured. Structure is really important in fiction, I think. Having just read 2 very shapeless novels about endlessly disappointing husbands where the husbands didn't really get any more or less disappointing by the end. And I just really felt the absence of a kind of, here's a shapely thing that's been structured in a way where you're going to start here, you're going to maybe get a bit tantalizingly lost and you're going to end up here. And I think people find that structure satisfying. I think it conveys a sense of narrative authority that people like. Mm-hmm. Thoughts about Miss Marple being about a little? Yes, she is a little old lady. Yeah, no, she is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's learned everything she knows about human nature just from living in a village and being attuned to the goings on and the gossip. She's the most brilliant creation. And did you say you thought Joan Hickson was a good Miss Marple? Yeah, same. So I think, okay, can't prove this at all, but here is my theory. I think God knows that Agatha Christie is the best writer ever. And I think because he knows that, he gave her a special treat, which is he gave her 2 actors that would not only brilliantly play, but actually embody in almost a kind of mythical way her 2 main characters. So I think David Suchet and Joan Hickson, that they're the perfect Poirot and Marple, but I think they're actually more than that. I think they actually become Poirot and Marple. And I think God arranged for that to happen as a special reward to Agatha Christie for being the best writer ever. It's one of my many unprovable theories. Yes. Were you going to ask a question? Sorry, no. Yes.
Are any of the characters in that book inspired by real people? Are the kids inspired by yours or whatever?
Totally. So, Rhiannon and Toby Lambert basically are my kids, Phoebe and Guy. Rhiannon she's called Rhi for short, she has a part-time job at a mobile cafe called Cupwoodley Mobile, which was based on my daughter's first ever casual job at Cafe Nero. And my daughter is just hilarious when she's older now, so hopefully she'll have a different attitude, but all the way through college and university she had part-time jobs, and she just had this bizarre attitude to them, which was when she was applying for them, she was desperate to get them, and she would go all out to be the best interviewee, and she would prepare, and she would be so delightful and impress them, and she would really, really want to get the job. She almost always got the job because she is brilliant at impressing people. She'd be thrilled that she got the job every time. We'd have a huge celebration. Within 24 hours, can't believe I have to get up at 7 and go and like sell stupid drinks to people. And what do you mean? What do you mean you want an iced frappuccino? Just have a PG Tips and shut up. So that, Rhee's attitude to her job at Cupwoodley Mobile is totally my daughter. The son, Toby Lambert, is based on my son. The Welsh Terrier, Champ Lambert, is based on my dog, Chunk. The family's previous Welsh Terrier, Furbert, is based on my previous Welsh Terrier, Brewster. Sally Lambert is entirely based on me, though a more hysterical version. Now, anybody else? The Gavies, the family that the Lamberts are kind of at war with, are not actually based on individuals. They're more a kind of amalgamation of various unpleasant types I've encountered, and I think that's probably about it. But yeah, there's always quite a lot of me and my family in my books. Yeah. The husband, actually, the dad, Mark Lambert, is not so much based on my husband, because my husband would put up way more resistance if I told him he had to go on the run. He's not a fan of any kind of extreme action. So, and I needed Mark Lambert to agree to go with the family. So I had to make the husband a bit more cooperative than my husband would be in those circumstances. Yes.
Have any advice for people who are trying to become professional authors?
I have so much advice, not only for people who want to become professional authors, but for anyone who wants to write. You know, a lot of people don't want to write at all, which is fine, but I'm always surprised by how many people kind of think, oh, I'd love to, but I've probably left it too late, or I'd love to, but I wouldn't know where to begin. And then there's lots of people who are writing who are kind of not happy with the way it's going. And I became so aware of this, and I had so much advice, that's why I created my Dream Author writing coaching. Because what I realized was, I'd always noticed that lots of writers or people who wanted to write were feeling that it wasn't going well. But what I noticed was that whenever in my writing career, because before I got published, I was being rejected lots of times and all of that. But I noticed that whenever I felt it wasn't going well, my responses were quite different to the responses I was seeing. And then I tried to work out why that was. And I soon worked out why it was. And what it was that when I was being rejected and feeling, oh, it's all terrible and why isn't it working, I felt disappointed. I felt quite gutted if it wasn't going well. But I also totally believed that one day it would go well. And it makes such a difference. So I can remember all those rejections, which at the time were so painful. And, you know, I'm quite melodramatic. So often I would be like weeping on the platform of a station because someone had said they didn't want my latest book. But it was always like, why does it have to take so long? I thought this might be the time it would work. I know it's definitely going to work. I'm going to be mega famous and successful. So why can't it happen now? But the fact that I knew it was going to work one day, and obviously, right, I didn't know. I just thought I knew. But because it felt like I knew, I kept on going. And what I noticed was most people, after enough knockbacks, start to think that means it can't work. And that is the biggest misconception, because however many knockbacks you've had, there's only a reason to think that means you'll get more if you carry on doing everything you've been doing already without changing any of the variables. But we always can change the variables. And so past disappointments, even if you've had 50,000 of them, don't mean anything about what's going to happen next, especially if we start thinking differently from now on and start doing different things. So that was why I created Dream Author, because there's so much. So if I had to sum it up, I should say actually, on the Dream Author website, dreamauthorcoaching.com, on the home page and the page that describes the program, there's loads of free goodies. If you just look at those two pages, you'll find so much content just for free. Videos you can watch, things you can listen to. It's all me banging on about stuff, but it's good. Me banging on usefully about stuff. So that is really helpful. But if I had to boil it down to one thing, it is this. Once you realise the huge gap that exists between the facts and what you believe about the facts, that's where all the potential for amazingness lies. So just to give you an example, when I first started Dream Author, one of the first people who joined was a woman who was 74, and she signed up straight away and she said, "You probably can't help me." I was like, "Don't bet on it." She said, "I've had this brilliant idea." Well, I think it's brilliant. It's probably not brilliant, but I think it might be brilliant. But no one's going to want it even if I do write it, because I'm 74, I'm way too old, and I've published 5 novels already, and each one has sold fewer copies than the last. So I've got a really obvious kind of failing sales track record. And I said, "Okay, tell me the idea." She told me the idea. It was obviously a winner. It was like one of those rare hooks where you just go, of course everyone will want a book like that. So I told her that. And she said, "Yes, but I'm 74 and I've got this track record." I said, "Doesn't matter at all. No one will give a toss about either of those things, because this idea is so strong, as long as you do it well. But we can do that." And she said, "Well, I just think I'm just too old." And she was so convinced. And it was a real struggle for me to get her. In the end, I said to her, "Right, what I want you to do," because she wouldn't agree to even write like the first 100 pages. And she said, "Look, if I was younger, maybe, but I'm 74. I'm not wasting time writing a book that no one's going to want. If you want me to write it, I have to know that a publisher wants it first." I said, "Okay, how are we going to achieve that then? Publishers don't generally come and tell us they want books that don't yet exist, unless we're sort of Jamie Oliver or somebody." She just wouldn't write it. She was so sure it would fail. So in the end, I said to her, "Okay, I'm sure it would succeed. So what I want you to do is, for the next 14 days, every day, I want you to consciously say to yourself, I don't believe this book idea can work, but Sophie really does. And just say that to yourself over and over again, and we'll see how you feel in 2 weeks." So 2 weeks later, I said, "Okay, how did it go?" She said, "Well, I must admit, repeating to myself all those times that you think it could work, it did make me realize I still don't think it can work, but I am very aware that you do think it would work, and you might know a bit more than I do about the literary world, though I still think I'm right, but maybe you're right. So I'm willing to write like 3 chapters. I was like, "Great." So she wrote 3 chapters. I sent it to, no, I told her who to send it to. I said to this agent, "A book is coming your way that you're going to love." The agent loved the idea and said, "If you could write me 100 pages and a plan of the rest, I reckon I could get an auction for this." And when you get an auction with publishers, then that takes the price up. So then she was willing to write the 100 pages. There was an auction, and the book sold for 400 grand on a preempt at the auction. Now, she nearly, very, very nearly deprived herself of that success because she was convinced that her belief was the objective fact, that a 74-year-old who's only written books that didn't sell can't succeed. Whereas I knew that our brains, whoever we are, our brains will always tell us things are impossible and things are true. And it's just not true. Like, it is just not true. I have things in my brain that I don't think I can do. Like, I genuinely don't believe I could ever modernize a house. I have friends who buy houses that look horrendous. I'm like, what are they doing? Then they go in and they like wreck everything a bit more, and then they rebuild everything, and then they paint everything, and they do it themselves. And I'm like, wow. And I'm never going to try and do that because I fundamentally don't believe I could. So I pay other people to do that in my houses, and I pick people who I believe can do it because they've done it before. But I wouldn't hire someone who's going, what, you're telling me you want that green wall to be turned into an orange wall? Not sure I can do that. Like, I would never hire that person, right? So when we believe that our thoughts reflect the objective facts, then we're not going to try anything, because our thoughts are often, it's never going to work. If I didn't get an agent for the last book, then I won't get one for this book. So, yeah, my one bit of advice is, if you want to succeed or achieve something in writing or in anything that you haven't yet succeeded in or achieved, ask yourself, where am I assuming that my beliefs are the facts where that might not be true? And that's where all the potential is.
That's brilliant, because you don't get a lot of writing advice that deals with the emotional end. It's always, plot it this way.
Yeah, which is another reason I created Dream Author, because there's many, many brilliant courses for people who want to, learn how to write a bestseller or learn how to write a crime novel. And they're great, a lot of those courses. But there is nothing that teaches you and helps you with what I regard as absolutely the most important bits, which is how to deal with the emotional and psychological challenges of pursuing writing success and pursuing a life as a writer. So that's really why I created Dream Author.
It can take years to write a novel, especially your first one, where you're much slower.
Yeah.
So the psychological battle is much harder.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on call. So if any of my dream authors are having a crisis, or something's happened and they're feeling down and they're unmotivated, then they can get coaching from me. I mean, I coached someone recently who, she's like, oh, and this has happened and this has happened, and I just feel completely powerless and as though it's all going badly. And I said to her, like, I get that, because you're disappointed that it was this outcome and not that outcome, but also you're in an incredibly strong and brilliant position with so much potential for success. We just need to do this, this, and this. But she hadn't even thought of that, because she was kind of stuck in this story where it all wasn't working. And the minute we decide it's not working, then we make that become true. So like I'm in a healthy eating. I've reinvented my approach to eating. So I now eat healthily. And part of what's making that work is that if I, like last night I went out with my son to this restaurant, and my favorite thing on the starter menu had some bread with it. It was pate, which I'm allowed to have. I generally try not to have bread, but I wanted the pate and it had bread with it. So I just didn't make the fact that I had that bread mean anything other than I had some bread. Whereas every time before, it's been like, clearly I'm not doing this eating thing anymore, because look, here I am having bread. I'll probably have more bread later now that I've had some bread now. And then that comes true. So whatever we think and believe is our thoughts become our reality very, very often, which is why I go around thinking my musicals are going to end up having long runs on Broadway. Because when I think that, I then start taking actions that make that more likely to happen. Okay. Okay, well, as I say, I'm going to put that bit of paper out. If anyone wants to know about the How to Write a Life-Changing Book course, and if anyone wants a book signed, I'm very happy to sign them for you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.